The summons. The celestial amphitheater hung suspended in the void between stars, a monument to the Kashari Empire's thousand-year dominion over the Orion Arm. Within its crystalline walls, 300 species bent their will to imperial decree, their representatives seated in descending rings that spiraled toward the judgment dais like water circling a drain. Ambassador Lyra Castellanos checked her chronometer for the 5th time in as many minutes. The human delegation, all 3 of them, sat in the outermost ring so far from the center that she needed optical enhancements to see the Exarch's throne. Beside her, Dr. Tomas Reeve adjusted his translation earpiece, while Commander Zara Okonkwo sat with the stillness of a coiled spring. "They're making us wait," Zara muttered, her dark eyes scanning the chamber's occupants. Scales, feathers, chitinous plates, and forms that defied easy categorization filled the tiers. Not one pair of eyes met theirs. Standard intimidation. "It's working," Tomas admitted, tugging at his collar. The atmospheric pressure here was calibrated for the Kashari, slightly too dense for human lungs, making every breath feel labored. Lyra's jaw tightened. 18 months ago, humanity had detected the Kashari scout ships entering the Sol system. 6 months ago, the Empire delivered its ultimatum: submit to vassal status or face pacification protocols. 3 months of desperate diplomacy had bought them this: a single hearing before the Galactic Council. One chance to speak. One chance to save 8 billion lives. A resonant chime silenced the chamber's murmuring. The lights dimmed except for a single shaft of illumination that struck the judgment dais. Through a shimmer of displaced space, Exarch Ventherax materialized, 9 feet of reptilian grace wrapped in robes that seemed woven from starlight. His 4 eyes swept the chamber with the boredom of immortal routine. "We convene," his voice boomed through neural translators, bypassing ears to speak directly to minds, to address the petition of species Homo sapiens. Primitives who dwell on the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star. They contest their assigned status. Lyra stood, her legs steadier than she felt. "Exarch Ventherax, honored council members. Humanity thanks you for this audience. Your gratitude is noted and irrelevant." The Exarch's secondary eyes focused on her while his primary pair examined a holographic display. "Your species emerged from tribal warfare a mere 10,000 cycles ago. You achieved spaceflight 2 centuries past. You have no significant technological innovations, no unique resources, no strategic value. Yet you refuse the Empire's generous offer of protection." "We refuse subjugation," Lyra corrected, her voice carrying through the amplification field. "There's a difference." A ripple of reaction circled the chamber. Hisses, clicks, subsonic rumbles that her translator rendered as variations of scandalized disapproval. Exarch Ventherax's tail swept in what might have been amusement. "Subjugation. You use that word as if you have a choice. The Kashari Empire encompasses 47,000 star systems. We maintain peace across 900 species. We have existed since before your world cooled from stellar dust. And yet," Lyra pressed forward, "your own imperial charter recognizes the right of petition. Article 7, subsection 12, any sentient species may appeal their classification before the assembled council. A formality extended to you out of mercy." The Exarch's voice hardened. "Councillor Rathsek, present the evaluation committee's findings." A mantis-like being unfolded from a nearby tier, its compound eyes glittering. "The humans demonstrate stage 4 technological development, adequate for system defense, insufficient for stellar warfare. Military assessment, negligible threat coefficient. Cultural assessment, fragmented governance, persistent internal conflicts, 87 active territorial disputes at time of survey. Psychological assessment, aggressive, territorial, emotionally volatile. Recommendation, vassal class theta. Standard integration protocols." Tomas leaned toward Lyra. "That's it? They're deciding our future based on a 3-month survey?" "They've done this before," Zara whispered back. "Probably 1,000 times." Exarch Ventherax gestured, and the holographic display expanded, showing Earth rotating slowly. "You see before you a divided world. 4 major power blocks, 17 secondary nations, countless tribal factions. You war among yourselves over resources, ideologies, ancient grievances. What defense could such chaos mount against true unity?" Lyra's hands clenched behind her back. This was the moment. Everything they'd planned, everything they'd risked, came down to the next words she spoke. "Exarch," she said quietly, "you've made an error in your assessment." The chamber fell utterly silent. "An error?" Ventherax's 4 eyes fixed on her with sudden, predatory focus. Elaborate. Lyra smiled and it didn't reach her eyes. You've mistaken our greatest weakness for what it truly is, our most dangerous strength. The evidence. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats before Exarch Ventherax's laughter echoed through the celestial amphitheater, a sound like grinding continental plates. Your weakness is your strength? How very primitive. His tail coiled in obvious amusement. Counselor Rathzek spent 3 months cataloging your conflicts. Shall we display them? The resource wars of 2089? The Antarctic territorial dispute? The Pacific Economic Alliance versus the Euro-Asian Compact? Please do, Lyra said, her voice steady. Tomas shot her a warning glance, but she ignored it. They'd wargamed this scenario 17 different ways. Now they'd find out if their gamble had merit. The holographic display shifted, showing news feeds from Earth. Explosions, demonstrations, naval standoffs. 300 species watched humanity's dirty laundry projected across the stars. Chaos, Ventherax declared. Disorder. Primitives squabbling over scraps while empires collapse stars. He gestured dismissively. This is why vassalage exists. We bring order to such dysfunction. You should be grateful. Grateful? Lyra's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. You show our conflicts. Let me show you our resolutions. She activated her personal projector, a risk as unauthorized technology in the council chamber violated 7 different protocols. But the human delegation had one advantage. The Kashari were so certain of their superiority that they'd barely searched them. New images bloomed in the air. The resource wars ended not through conquest but negotiation. 17 nations, 43 megacorporations, and 12 independent city-states hammered out the Melbourne Accords. It took 6 years and almost failed 20 times. But it held. One example proves nothing, Rathzek chittered. Then consider this. Tomas stood, his academic demeanor shifting to lecture mode. The Great Plague of 2156, an engineered virus that emerged from biocorporate warfare. Mortality rate, 47%. Every nation on Earth had reason to hoard resources, close borders, save themselves. The display showed makeshift hospitals, crowded streets, mass graves. Instead, Tomas continued, they shared. Research data flowed freely. Manufacturing capacity was pooled. The African Federation, which had been locked in a Cold War with the Americas for 30 years, sent medical personnel. The Pacific Alliance diverted vaccines to hard-hit regions despite domestic shortages. Sentiment, Ventherax waved a clawed hand. Emotion clouds your judgment. It always does with young species. Does it? Zara rose to her feet, her military bearing transforming the gesture into a challenge. Commander Zara Okonkwo, Earth Defense Force. Former Nigerian Army, seconded to Joint Command after the Sahara conflicts. You want to know what your evaluators missed, Exarch? The Kashari leader's eyes narrowed. They saw we fight each other. They didn't ask why we're still here. Zara's voice carried the weight of combat experience. Humanity has survived 12 extinction-level events. Supervolcano eruptions. Ice ages. Asteroid impacts. Ourselves. We're the only species on our planet that achieved sentience, and we did it the hard way, competing with megafauna, plagues, climate catastrophes that should have ended us 100 times over. She advanced down the tier toward the center, violating another protocol. No one stopped her. You know what we learned, Exarch? We learned that conflict breeds adaptation. Every war taught us something. Every crisis forced innovation. Your empire has been stable for 1,000 years. Zara's smile was sharp. That's not strength. That's stagnation. Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. A delegate from the Thornback Collective, 6-limbed beings known for their conservative politics, rose in protest. This is heresy. The Empire brought us peace. The Empire, Lyra interjected, reclaiming the floor, brought you conformity. And there's nothing wrong with that, for those who desire it. But humanity didn't spend 10,000 years clawing our way to the stars just to kneel. Exarch Ventherax's amusement had evaporated. You speak boldly for a species that cannot defend itself against even one battle group. We have 40,000 warships. You have, what? 300 outdated cruisers. 347, Zara corrected. As of this morning. The disparity is meaningless. Is it? Lyra locked eyes with the Exarch. Counselor Rathzek's report mentioned our territorial disputes. But did it mention that every single conflict in the past 50 years ended in treaty, not annihilation? We could have destroyed each other with nuclear fire centuries ago. We chose not to. She paused, letting that sink in. You see weakness in our division. I see a species that argues instead of exterminating. That competes instead of conquering. That somehow, despite every reason to fail, keeps choosing cooperation over extinction. Pretty words, Ventherax said coldly. But the Council requires proof of worth, not philosophy. What can humanity offer the Empire that justifies your independence? Lyra smiled. Let me tell you about Mars. The Mars Paradox. The holographic display shifted again, this time showing the red planet in crystalline detail. Mars hung in the void, its russet surface scarred with canyons and ancient riverbeds, its poles capped with ice that glinted in distant sunlight. Your surveyors documented our Mars colony, Lyra began, her voice taking on a lecturer's cadence. Population, 400,000. Established, 2187. Terraform progress, 6%. Counselor Rathsek's report classified it as adequate for a juvenile species. I believe the exact wording was unremarkable. Rathsek's mandibles clicked in what might have been annoyance. The assessment was accurate. Basic dome habitats, limited atmosphere processing, conventional mining operations. Nothing we haven't seen from 100 developing species. Then you missed what makes it remarkable, Tomas said, pulling up historical data. Mars colony was established during the height of the Pacific-Atlantic Cold War. The two largest power blocks on Earth, controlling 80% of our industrial capacity, locked in ideological opposition that nearly went nuclear twice. Images flowed across the display, military buildups, propaganda posters, submarines prowling oceanic trenches. Both sides wanted Mars, Tomas continued. The Strategic Resources Committee projected that whoever controlled Martian helium-3 deposits would achieve economic dominance for the next century. The Pacific Alliance started construction on their colony ship, the Yangtze. 3 months later, the Atlantic Federation began building Enterprise. A counselor from the Velthran Consensus, beings of living crystal who communicated through light patterns, pulsed a question that the translator rendered as, "And this led to warfare?" It should have, Lyra admitted. Our own military analysts gave it 67% probability. Instead, something unexpected happened. The display showed 2 massive vessels in Earth orbit, bristling with construction equipment and populated with thousands of workers. Dr. Keiko Tanaka, Pacific Alliance astrophysicist. Dr. Samuel Nkunda, Atlantic Federation geologist. Both assigned to their respective colony programs. They met at an academic conference in neutral Switzerland. Lyra pulled up photographs of 2 middle-aged scientists shaking hands. They'd been colleagues before the Cold War. They started talking. Talking? Ventherax's tone dripped skepticism. Talking, Lyra confirmed. About the waste. The duplication of effort. The fact that both programs were trying to solve identical problems. Radiation shielding, water extraction, crop adaptation. They calculated that if both colonies succeeded, they'd compete for the same resources and probably go to war within 20 years. If one failed, millions of lives and trillions in currency would be wasted. Tsar picked up the threat. So they did something crazy. They leaked classified information to each other. Shared research. Coordinated, independently developed solutions that were mysteriously compatible. All while their governments were threatening each other with annihilation. Espionage, Rathsek declared. Treason. Absolutely, Lyra agreed. By the time their governments discovered what they'd done, both colony ships were already constructed on converging specifications. The programs were so intertwined that separating them would have scrapped 5 years of work. The political cost of failure exceeded the cost of cooperation. The display showed the 2 colony ships launching in tandem, their trajectories synchronized. They called it the Mars Compromise. The Pacific Alliance and Atlantic Federation jointly administered the colony. Shared governance. Divided resources. They even split the naming rights. The primary settlement is Tanaka Station. Tomas smiled. It worked. Mars became neutral ground. A place where rivals cooperated because the alternative was failure. Within a generation, it became the model for Earth's joint space program. The same pattern that almost destroyed us became the pattern that united us. A long silence filled the chamber. Finally, Exarch Ventherax spoke, his voice carefully neutral. Interesting historical anecdote. But it changes nothing. You still lack the strength to resist integration. Does strength only mean warships? Lyra challenged. The Kashari Empire rules through superior force. But humanity survived by turning enemies into allies. We've done it thousands of times across our history. She advanced toward the judgment dais, her posture respectful but unyielding. You want to know what we offer? Adaptation. Innovation born from necessity. We've solved impossible problems by cooperating with people we hated. We've built bridges across divides that should have been permanent. We don't just survive conflict, we evolve from it. The Empire, Ventherax said coldly, does not require evolution. We achieved perfection millennia ago. Then respectfully, Exarch, you're dying and don't know it yet. The chamber erupted. Delegates rose from their seats, voices overlapping in a cacophony of outrage and shock. Security constructs materialized along the perimeter, their weapons charging with visible energy. Lyra stood firm, her heart hammering but her expression calm. Exarch Ventherax raised one clawed hand, and silence crashed down like a physical force. Explain yourself, human. And choose your words carefully. They may be your last. The dying empire. Lyra felt 300 species watching her, their attention like physical pressure against her skin. Zara had shifted her stance, ready to fight if this went sideways, though what good that would do against antimatter weapons, Lyra couldn't imagine. Tomas had gone pale, but his fingers danced across his data tablet, pulling up the research they'd spent 6 months compiling. The Kashari Empire, Lyra began, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system, has ruled the Orion Arm for 1047 standard years. In that time, you've incorporated 900 species, prevented 417 regional conflicts, maintained stability across an unprecedented volume of space. Finally, you speak sense, Ventherax rumbled. I'm not finished. Lyra gestured, and Tomas transmitted their data to the central display. Dr. Reeve, if you would. Tomas cleared his throat, his academic instincts overriding his fear. We analyzed public records from the Imperial Archives, all legally accessible data. We noticed interesting patterns in species integration over time. Graphs materialized in the air, showing timelines of conquest and integration. First 300 years of the Empire, 120 species integrated. Average time to full vassal status, 48 years. Next 300 years, 215 species. Average integration time, 63 years. Most recent 300 years, 565 species. Average integration time, 89 years and climbing. A counselor from the Praxian hegemony, quadrupedal beings with crystalline antlers, spoke up. You suggest inefficiency? Our integration protocols have improved with experience. No, Tomas replied. I'm suggesting that each generation of vassals is harder to integrate than the last. And I think I know why. He pulled up demographic data, economic indicators, cultural metrics. The first species you absorbed were relatively primitive, early industrial, sometimes pre-industrial. They saw Kashari technology as magic. Integration was easy because the gap was insurmountable. But as the Empire expanded, you encountered more advanced species. Beings who understood the technology gap could be bridged, who had their own innovations worth preserving. The data shifted, showing resistance movements, cultural preservation efforts, minor rebellions. Your own records show increasing unrest in outer territories. The Rebellion of Kasktarn. The Velthran Cultural Renaissance. The Thornback Independence Movement. Yes, we noticed that entry was redacted, but the economic disruptions it caused are still visible in trade records. Rathsek's mandibles clacked in agitation. Minor disturbances. All resolved within acceptable parameters. Resolved by force, Lyra interjected. Every single time. And each resolution required more resources than the last. She pulled up military deployment records. Battle Group 7 has been stationed in the Kasktarn sector for 90 years. Battle Group 12 hasn't left Velthran space in 40. You're not expanding anymore, Exarch. You're holding territory against internal pressure. Ventherax's tail lashed, the first sign of genuine emotion Lyra had seen from him. You overstep, human. The Empire's strength is beyond question. Is it? Zara stepped forward. Military analyst perspective. You have 40,000 warships. Sounds impressive. But you're spread across 47,000 star systems. That's less than one ship per system. Earth has 347 ships protecting a single system. Our concentration of force is actually higher than yours. Ridiculous, a delegate hissed. Our ships are vastly superior. Individually, yes, Zara agreed. But wars aren't won by individual superiority. They're won by logistics, adaptation, and the will to fight. And Exarch, your empire is running out of all three. Lyra pressed the attack. You call us divided, but your own empire is fracturing. Species maintaining their languages, cultures, religious practices despite centuries of integration. The very diversity you pride yourself on is becoming the fault line that will tear you apart. And humanity offers what? Ventherax demanded, his voice tight with controlled fury. Chaos? Division? Your endless squabbling as a model for governance. We offer a different paradigm, Lyra said quietly. You rule through dominance. Every species in your empire exists in relationship to the Kashari, superior to inferior. But humanity learned something different. We learned to build horizontal relationships. Alliances between equals. She gestured at the Mars data still floating in the display. The Pacific Alliance and Atlantic Federation didn't merge. They didn't become one entity. They remained separate, distinct, often disagreeing. But they learned to cooperate on shared interests while maintaining their independence. That's the model humanity brings. Tomas added, the mathematical models are clear. Hierarchical empires have a natural growth limit before internal complexity exceeds management capacity. You've hit that limit. But network structures, cooperative frameworks between autonomous entities, can scale indefinitely. You suggest, Ventherax said slowly, that we abandon 1,000 years of proven governance for your primitive experiments? No, Lyra replied. I'm suggesting you're about to experience what Earth went through a century ago. A fundamental reorganization from the bottom up. It nearly destroyed us. But we survived by embracing cooperation over control. She took a deep breath. The question isn't whether the Empire will change Exarch. It's whether it will change gracefully or collapse catastrophically. And whether humanity will be your example, or your first domino. The challenge? The chamber had gone from outrage to dangerously quiet. Lyra could feel the shift in atmosphere, like the moment before lightning strikes, when static electricity raises the hair on your arms. Several delegates had activated privacy shields around their seats, conferring in whispered urgency. Others stared at the human delegation with expressions ranging from horror to fascination. Exarch Ventherax remained utterly still, his 4 eyes fixed on Lyra with an intensity that made her want to step back. She held her ground. You come before the council, the Exarch finally spoke, each word measured and cold, claiming our empire is dying. You present economic analyses and historical patterns as if they were weapons. You insult 1,000 years of prosperity and peace. He rose from the judgment dais, his full 9-foot height casting shadows across the lower tiers. And yet I find myself intrigued. That single word sent ripples of shock through the assembly. Exarch, Rathzek protested. Surely you cannot give credence to these primitives' fantasies. Can I not? Ventherax's tail swept in a gesture that silenced the mantis-like counselor. They have done what no vassal species has done in 300 years, they have surprised me. That alone merits consideration. He descended from the dais, each step deliberate, until he stood on the same level as the human delegation. Up close, his scales shimmered with iridescent patterns that spoke of age and power. You speak of cooperation between equals, Ambassador Castellanos. But there is no equality here. My empire commands resources beyond your comprehension. Our technology makes your weapons obsolete. Our fleets could sterilize Earth's biosphere in a matter of hours. Yes, Lyra agreed simply. Yes. Ventherax's secondary eyes narrowed. You acknowledge this and still refuse vassalage? We acknowledge reality. We're not delusional. Lyra met his gaze without flinching. But strength isn't just about who has the bigger gun. It's about who can adapt when circumstances change. Zara picked up the threat. You mentioned sterilizing Earth's biosphere. Tactically sound. Strategically catastrophic. You'd prove to every other species in your empire that resistance equals extinction. How many dormant independence movements do you think that would activate? We would crush them, Rathzek declared. With what? Tomas countered, pulling up the deployment data again. You're already stretched thin managing current unrest. Add another front, or 5 fronts, and your response time degrades. Resources get diverted. The whole system becomes unstable. Lyra stepped closer to the Exarch. You're in a trap of your own making. If you let us go, you look weak. If you destroy us, you look tyrannical. Either way, the myth of the benevolent empire takes a hit. Ventherax's laugh was unexpected. Genuine amusement rather than mockery. You are either brilliantly clever or catastrophically foolish. Perhaps both. He turned to address the full council. The humans present an interesting dilemma. Their analysis, while presumptuous, is not entirely without merit. More shocked murmurs. A delegate from the Sarati collective, beings of pure energy contained in geometric lattices, pulsed a question. You would consider their petition favorably? I would consider, Ventherax said carefully, a test. Lyra's pulse quickened. What kind of test? The Exarch's eyes gleamed with something that might have been anticipation. You claim humanity's strength lies in cooperation under pressure. In turning enemies into allies. In solving impossible problems through adaptation rather than force. He gestured, and the holographic display reconfigured, showing a star system Lyra didn't recognize, 3 planets orbiting a dying red giant, the innermost world fractured and cooling. The Caithran system. Former industrial hub, abandoned 70 years ago when its star entered senescence. But it holds something valuable. Quantum processing nodes built into the bedrock of the second planet. Technology from a precursor species, predating even the Kashari. We've been trying to extract it for decades. Tomas leaned forward, his academic interest clearly piqued. What's the problem? The planet is unstable. Volcanic activity, tectonic chaos, radiation storms from the dying star. We've lost 4 extraction teams, different species, different approaches. The Velthran tried crystalline resonance mining. The Thornbacks attempted deep core drilling. The Praxians even experimented with matter phase technology. Rathzek chittered. All failed. The environmental chaos is too severe. Any permanent installation gets destroyed within months. Ventherax turned back to the humans. You have 6 months. Extract at least 30% of the quantum processing nodes, enough to make the operation economically viable. Do this with your limited resources, your primitive technology, and your vaunted cooperation. And if we succeed? Lyra asked. Then humanity will be granted autonomous status within the Empire. Not vassals but independent allies. Trade rights, territorial sovereignty, representation in the Council. Everything you seek. And if we fail? The Exarch's smile showed far too many teeth. Then you accept vassalage without further protest. Your defiance ends. Your species integrates according to standard protocols. Zara frowned. 6 months to do what 4 advanced species couldn't do in decades? Those aren't favorable odds. No, Ventherax agreed. But you didn't come here seeking favorable odds. You came seeking a chance. This is it. Lyra looked at her companions. Tomas was already running calculations on his tablet, his expression troubled. Zara's jaw was set in that particular way that meant she was analyzing threat scenarios. Both looked to her. 1 chance. Impossible odds. Everything riding on a single throw of the dice. Lyra turned back to the Exarch and extended her hand. We accept your challenge. The extraction. The Meridian Dawn dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Caithran system, and immediately, every alarm on the bridge started screaming. Radiation levels approaching critical. Lieutenant Marcus Webb called from the sensor station, his fingers dancing across controls. That star's throwing off enough hard particles to cook us in 48 hours. Then we'd better work fast, Lyra said from the captain's chair, a position she'd never expected to hold, but desperate times had reorganized Earth's command structure in creative ways. Zara, what's our window? Commander Okonkwo studied the tactical display, her expression grim. The second planet completes a rotation every 18 hours. Based on the Kashari data, volcanic activity peaks during solar exposure, then settles during the dark cycle. We'll have maybe 6 hours of relative stability per rotation to work. 6 hours to do what 4 species couldn't do in years, Marcus muttered. No pressure. The Meridian Dawn was humanity's hastily assembled answer to an impossible problem. A mining vessel retrofitted with enough shielding to survive Caithran's radiation, enough drilling equipment to reach the quantum nodes, and enough processing capacity to extract them without triggering catastrophic tectonic feedback. In theory. Approaching the second planet now, reported Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka from Navigation, granddaughter of the same Keiko Tanaka who'd helped forge the Mars Compromise. Matching orbital velocity. And, wow. The view screen showed why 4 species had failed. The planet's surface writhed like something alive, continents cracking and reforming, magma fountains erupting kilometers into the thin atmosphere, radiation storms crackling between volcanic plumes like purple lightning. That's not a planet, Marcus breathed. That's hell with a gravitational field. Tomas floated onto the bridge from the research section, moving carefully in the reduced gravity. I've analyzed the Kashari failure reports. Each species tried to establish permanent infrastructure. Bases, drilling platforms, processing facilities. The planet destroyed them all. So we don't build permanent infrastructure, Lyra said, seeing where he was going. We go mobile. Exactly. Tomas pulled up schematics. The quantum nodes are distributed across the second continent's bedrock, about 40 meters below the surface. The Velthran tried to mine from orbit. Too imprecise. The Thornbacks tried to build ground installations. Too slow. Zara studied the data. We need something that can land, drill fast, extract the nodes, and lift off before the local geology notices we're there. The old oil rig principle, Lyra murmured. My great-grandfather worked the North Atlantic platforms. Same concept, get in, extract, get out before the environment kills you. Over the next 3 weeks they refined the approach. Meridian Dawn would enter low orbit during the planet's dark cycle. Teams would deploy in armored landers, 6 crews, 6 different sites. Each lander carried compact drilling equipment designed for speed over permanence. Plasma cutters that could bore through 40 meters of rock in 2 hours. The first attempt was a disaster. Lander 3 abort. Lyra shouted as seismic sensors lit up red. The whole region's going active. But Lieutenant Sarah Kim's voice came back steady. We're at 37 meters. 3 more minutes and we're through. You don't have 3 minutes. Then I guess we work faster. Lyra watched helplessly as the telemetry showed magma chambers rupturing beneath Lander 3's position. The drilling continued, 38 meters, 39. Got it? Sarah's triumphant shout was cut off by an explosion that registered on sensors from orbit. Lander 3's thrusters fired at maximum burn, clawing away from the surface as a volcanic plume erupted directly beneath them. Status? Zara demanded. Hull integrity at 40%, but we got the nodes. 4 processing cores intact. It was brutal, dangerous work. They lost Lander 5 when a radiation storm fried its electronics. Lander 2 nearly didn't make it when unexpected tectonic activity shifted the bedrock mid-drill. But humanity had one advantage the other species lacked. They were used to operating in hostile environments with marginal equipment. Every team was a coalition. Sarah Kim had grown up in the Pacific Alliance. Her co-pilot, Andrei Obasanjo, hailed from the African Federation. Their drilling specialist, Dmitry Volkov, represented the Eurasian Compact. 3 people who, 20 years ago, might have been enemies. It's like Mars, Tomas observed, watching the crews work with synchronized precision. Different factions, unified purpose. By week 6, they'd extracted 18% of the nodes. Progress was good but not good enough. We need to accelerate, Lyra told the assembled crew during a briefing. We're running out of time and the planetary activity is increasing. The star's solar flares are getting worse. Marcus pulled up new calculations. If we deploy all remaining landers simultaneously, hit 12 sites at once during the next dark cycle, we could reach 30% in a single operation. That's insane, Zara said flatly. We'd be splitting our response capacity. If even one team gets in trouble, we won't be able to help them. I know, Marcus admitted. But it's the only way we make the deadline. Lyra looked around the bridge. Young faces, old faces, every continent represented. People who'd volunteered for a suicide mission because their species' freedom hung in the balance. We take the shot, she decided. Coordinate with all lander crews. Next dark cycle we go all in. The verdict? The final extraction lasted 5 hours and 47 minutes of coordinated chaos that would be studied at military academies for generations. 12 landers descended simultaneously across the fracturing planet, their pilots threading the needle between volcanic eruptions and radiation storms. Plasma drills bit into bedrock while seismologists aboard Meridian Dawn tracked tectonic activity in real time, calling warning seconds before the planet itself rebelled against their intrusion. Lander 8's drill hit a pressurized magma chamber and had to abort with partial extraction. Lander 11's shields failed 30 meters down, cooking their electronics, but the crew manually completed the extraction using backup systems and raw determination. Lander 12 got trapped when a fissure opened beneath them, and only escaped because Lieutenant Tanaka performed a zero-visibility ascent through a volcanic plume that should have been impossible. When the last lander docked with Meridian Dawn, every crew member was exhausted, radiation-sick, and triumphant. 32% of the quantum processing nodes sat in their cargo hold. Now, 3 days later, the human delegation stood once again in the celestial amphitheater. The same 300 species watched. The same crystalline walls reflected starlight. But the silence was different this time. anticipatory rather than dismissive. Exarch Ventherax examined the processing nodes displayed before him, their quantum matrices glowing faintly with inner light. Beside him, a Kashari technical specialist confirmed their authenticity with increasingly bewildered gestures. 32%, the Exarch finally spoke. In 6 months. With 300 outdated cruisers and mining equipment we would have discarded as obsolete. 347 cruisers, Zara corrected automatically, then smiled. Sorry? Force of habit. Ventherax's eyes fixed on Lyra. How? We didn't try to conquer the planet, Lyra replied. We adapted to it. Worked with its cycles instead of against them. Used mobility instead of permanence. And we delegated, trusted each lander crew to make their own decisions rather than micromanaging from orbit. You lost personnel, Rathzek observed, mandibles clicking. 2 killed, 17 injured. Acceptable casualties for the Empire perhaps, but I was under the impression humans valued individual lives. We do, Lyra said quietly. Every loss hurt. But those crews volunteered knowing the risks. They believed our freedom was worth dying for. That's not something you can compel through vassalage. Tomas stepped forward, his academic enthusiasm undimmed by exhaustion. The other species failed because they applied their strengths to the wrong problem. The Velthran's crystalline technology is magnificent for precision work, terrible for crude speed extraction. The Thornback's drilling capacity is unmatched, but requires stable platforms. The Praxian's phase technology is revolutionary, but too sensitive for chaotic environments. And humanity's strength? Ventherax asked. Improvisation, Tomas said. We're good at solving problems with inadequate resources under terrible conditions. Because that's our entire evolutionary history. The Exarch was silent for a long moment, his tail coiling and uncoiling. A gesture Lyra had learned indicated deep thought. Counselor Rathzek, he finally said. Present the petition for vote. The mantis-like being's mandibles clacked in what might have been reluctance. The human delegation has completed the assigned task within specified parameters. Per Imperial Charter, Article 7, Subsection 12, they have demonstrated sufficient unique capability to warrant consideration for autonomous status. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some approving, many skeptical. All species in favor of granting humanity autonomous ally status indicate agreement. Lyra held her breath. This was it. Everything came down to whether their demonstration had convinced enough council members that humanity offered something valuable. Lights began appearing across the tiers, votes registering in the central tabulation. Green for approval. Red for denial. Amber for abstention. The voting seemed to take forever and no time at all. When the final tally appeared, Lyra felt her knees weaken. 212 green. 73 red. 15 amber. The motion carries, Ventherax declared. Humanity is hereby granted autonomous status within the Kashari Empire. You will retain sovereign control of your home system, hold voting representation in this council, and maintain independent military forces subject to mutual defense treaties. Relief flooded through Lyra so intensely she had to grab the tier railing for support. Beside her, Tomas was grinning like a fool. Zara's military composure finally cracked into a smile. But Ventherax wasn't finished. However, he continued, and the chamber quieted again, I have one additional proposal. The quantum processing nodes you extracted from Kathran represent technology we've sought for decades. You accomplished in 6 months what we could not in years. He descended from the judgment dais once more, approaching the human delegation. I propose a collaborative venture. Humanity provides extraction expertise and operational flexibility. The Empire provides advanced technology and resource access. Together we retrieve the remaining nodes, and split the proceeds equally. Lyra blinked. You're offering a business partnership? I am offering, Ventherax said, something like respect entering his voice, the first cooperative venture between the Kashari Empire and an autonomous species in 300 years. Your methods are crude. Your technology is primitive. But your approach to problem solving is. He paused, searching for the word, refreshing. Lyra looked at Zara and Tomas. Both nodded. She turned back to the Exarch and extended her hand. Then let's talk terms. As Ventherax's massive claw enveloped her hand in a gesture of agreement, Lyra reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From outcast petitioners to autonomous allies. From the species too weak to matter to partners the Empire actively sought. The celestial amphitheater erupted in noise, some cheering, some protesting, all reacting to a moment that would reshape the political landscape of the Orion Arm. In the outer ring, where the human delegation had first sat in isolation, other species now looked at them with new eyes. Not as primitives or future vassals, but as equals who'd earned their place through courage, innovation, and the very qualities the Empire had once dismissed as weaknesses. Humanity had addressed the Galactic Empire, and the galaxy would never be quite the same.